Dotson from the All of Us Research Program, and we're at the table today. We're going to be at the table talking about some really serious kind of issues that we face on day-to-day basis, and we're going to be talking about mental health, mental wellness, and also about women's health as it relates to some of these areas as well. I'm here today with Taquanda.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Taquanda Gilbert Crampton. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin.
And we are just so fortunate and blessed to be a part of the community to bring to you information related to how we look and view our health, how we also look at research. And just to give you a brief overview about our program, Taquanda's going to do that. And after that, we're going to start diving in a little bit more. We have some special guests with us today, and I'll tell you more about it after Taquanda talks about our program.
Yes, yes. So the All of Us Research Program is a part of the Precision Medicine Initiative. And what that means is more customizable healthcare. So, for example, your eyeglasses. You go in, you take different eye exams, they measure your eye, they do all the different tests, and they give you a prescription that's based on you and based on the results of that test. So, if we can do this with our eyes, how come we can't do this with the rest of our healthcare? So that's where the All of Us Research Program come in. You get to learn more about your health through genetics, the environment, and your lifestyle. So that way you can have more customizable healthcare and understand why these things are happening to your body.
And so Taquanda, how can people join our program? That's something that I want to make sure people are aware that this is not, it's not so hard to do.
Yes, yes, it's very easy, very easy. You have multiple ways that you can join our program. You can go online to joinallofus.org. Online, you can start your online account there. You can always give us a call or come see us in person at the Curative Building on the Medical College campus grounds. And you can also download our app. We have an app called All of Us Research Program. It's a blue background and you can get started even on your phone. And I feel like everyone loves that way better because you get to save your password there and it's just a one stop shop. So you can always come in person or you can always give us a call at 414-955-2689.
And you know, Daquanda, is so interesting when you said download the app and the color is important. Why is that?
Yes, the color is very important. We have two versions of the app. The blue app is for our participants that want to join, and then if you go on your app download area, there is also a white app. Now, the white app is for us staff members that's a part of the program and work for the program. So we just want to make sure that our participants are in the right app, so that way they can get their free results.
Thank you so much. You know, as we continue to look at the health in our community, one thing that is really so important for us is to look at our mental health. And that's
Mhm.
been some of the challenges. And, you know, I always think about when I was growing up, and also when you would hear some people say, oh, that person is just crazy in the family or whatever. And so, you know, I was always thinking about, like, you know, we really should have been looking at it a little bit more deeper, like what's really going on with that person. And it's not just sometimes just the way they are, but there's some
Mhm.
chemical or medical imbalances there that really need to be looked at. And so when we start looking at mental health, that is one area that um, it really is very true to our hearts as far as what should we do to look at. And you know, it was so interesting because when I started thinking about more about what's really going on with mental health in our community, and a lot of times we don't want to have that stigma of mental health, um,
Mhm.
as far as like how people are going to view us, what are we going to think about, you know, how they're going to think about us and things of that nature. But, you know, it was really interesting to me that when I was looking at this, and it goes so far back and it's so deep as far as how we are resilient people, how
Mhm.
we have been able to conquer and go through so many things in our lives. And I was just looking at it also like with Dr. Martin Luther King. They mentioned that he had severe depression during periods of his life and refused psychiatric treatment. They mentioned also that even he was urged to seek care for his staff. A lot of times he just felt like he couldn't really do that. He wasn't feeling comfortable because of the stigma that it might have been related to. And so when I read that, I was like, wow, we all go through some severe challenges sometimes, and we need to seek out help.
Mhm.
And that's not anything wrong with that. So when we're looking at our mental conditions, when we're looking at what's really going on with our lives, it's okay sometimes to just go out there and seek help. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that
Yes.
a little further along. We're going to have Dr. Izzard talking about mental health and wellness. We're going to also have Dr. Zena Franco, who's a clinical psychologist, on the show today to talk with us about mental health. And we're going to also have a young lady today to talk about women's health and some of the challenges that she's gone through, Yvette Morrow. She's going to be with us as well. So we have a fun and very interesting day
Yes.
as we kind of move forward through this process. But Taquanda, how do you look at mental health? Because I know you have that health background, and
Yes.
being in nursing, a lot of times that is a component that people have to deal with.
Yes. So mental health is very important. So when it comes to talking to your provider, I know people get a little bit nervous when it comes to mental health. They don't want to express their feelings or they feel like they don't have the courage, the confidence to really talk about those health issues. And I do want to encourage my community to bring those topics to the table. Find that comfort, find that strength so that way you can report these things to your provider so that way they can find that treatment and get you those resources that you need to find the help that you need. And even with our program during COVID, we had a survey called the COPE survey. So the COPE survey basically talked about different things that you were feeling during the pandemic. It was a monthly survey. So we took that data for all the ones that did complete the survey just to analyze to see how the pandemic affected our participants. And that helped us understand those resources and those issues that were going on in our communities, because that was a really difficult time. People wasn't able to see their family members. Some were stressed out from work, such as our healthcare providers, long hours, not able to go outside just to get some fresh air and feel the sun on your skin. So it was a lot of issues during the pandemic. And I do feel today that people do still suffer from those issues from the pandemic. So this is our chance to really get out and get that help and take advantage of those resources that we have out there in the community.
When I started looking at mental health and started looking at African Americans, Black people in America, the challenges that we have gone through. And I mentioned as far as that we are resilient as we have faced adversity for centuries.
Yes.
And, when I start looking back at what we've gone through, starting in the 1600s in the United States, where Black people faced oppression in the form of enslavement for our descendants. Um, and then you start looking at also through 1965, where laws were used to justify abuse of Black people. And then we look at years after the American Civil War, Black people faced oppression in the form of sharecropping. And we
Mhm.
start looking at also racism today and some
Yes.
of the things that impact on us. And when we're going to have Dr. Izzard in a few minutes start talking more about how that really affects us on a health basis. And when we start looking at how have we been so resilient, Quanda,
Mhm.
to overcome some of these challenges, or have we really overcome some of these challenges?
Right, right. I mean, it seems like there's something different every day. People discovering there's different forms of anxiety. You don't realize that you don't have it until someone points it out, and you're like, "Oh wait, I do feel like that. Like, what do I do? How do I fix this? Like, where do I go to help me understand how I can navigate through life with this?" And it's okay. It's okay. There's someone else out there that may be going through the same experiences as you, and it's just best to go out there and seek that help.
And it really is, because I start looking at all the different challenges. And so when I look at uh, people of color, African Americans, I think about how strong we have had to be. Number
Yes.
one, to make it over here. And
Yes.
number two, to go through all the different challenges that we have. And so now that really is bottled up inside of us in a sense. And
Mhm.
so a lot of our psychological challenges that we have are interrelated to that. And so when we start looking at some of those challenges, you know, um, it really allows for us to start seeing like we sometimes need to go and talk to somebody. We need
Yes.
to be able to say, hey, we have some issues here that's going on with our lives. And sometimes we need to talk to someone to sort things out and to
Yes.
make it clear for us to understand, to walk us through some of those challenges in our lives. So when we start looking at our mental health and our mental wellness, we start looking at how can we be better people? How can we make better decisions? And so we're going to talk about that today as we start looking at the not only the psychological components of it, but also our physical components as far as how it relates to that. And we have Dr. Kevin Izzard with us today. Welcome, Dr. Izzard.
Good morning. Sometimes you gotta just say "woosa." You know, and it's
Yes.
when we talk about depression and mental health. Depression is a big one. Anxiety is another big one.
Yes.
Those are two sides of the same coin. And oftentimes when people have depression, they'll be, especially men, instead of crying and things, men will just be mean, they'll be irritable. They might snap at people. And
I
same with
think
kids.
I
Kids
think
kind
women
of
do that
act
too,
up
don't
too.
we?
Yes.
Yeah, they do.
I
They
Yes.
think
do.
I do it.
They
I do
do.
it. My husband would say I do it sometimes,
Yeah.
Dr.
Yes.
Izzard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But you're less likely to see men that are crying and sitting in the room but yeah, we do get both, and then anxiety too. If we have Anxiety, if you're anxious all the time, it can affect your mood and make you feel depressed about it. So they are kind of two sides of the same coin. And interesting enough, they're treated with the same medication. So SSRIs, well, not all medications, but at least what we call SSRIs. Those are it stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So it increases the amount of serotonin in your brain. And serotonin is both associated with anxiety and depression. So that medication does treat both. But yeah, there's a lot of things in our lives nowadays, and COVID was that a huge stress test for us as a community and as a society, as a world, actually the whole world. There was a pandemic, and what we started seeing was that they weren't able to, like DeQuan just said, they weren't able to talk to
Yes.
people that they were able to normally talk to. Some people had to really isolate. People couldn't get visitors. If you're in a nursing home, you couldn't get your visitors. You couldn't get family coming in, or if you had an emergency in the hospital, you couldn't have visitors coming to the hospital to see you. And so all these people were deathly sick and in the ICU alone, except for the nurses. And so it really did, put a stress on people. We closed down schools. Children who normally were going to school, and for a lot of them, their parents are working. So the biggest contact they had during the day was that 8 hours with their teacher in their classroom, and they couldn't get that, and they had to do virtual learning. So all these things really put a stress on people. And even now, I was talking about this at church the other day that you look at the churches took a big hit. A lot of people didn't go to church for starting in 2020 when the shutdown happened, and a lot of them never came back. Some of them are doing it virtually, but there's a value in the Bible says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. And there's a reason for that, because there's a sense of community you get from being around other people. Even if you can watch the sermon online, it's not the same as being there in person, because you have to look someone in the eye and say, how you doing?
That interaction.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a little while ago, there was a tweet that went viral. It was Elmo from Sesame Street, of all people. Elmo, he said a tweet that says, Elmo just asking, how's everybody doing? And it went viral. I
I
mean,
love it.
millions of people, tens of millions of people, sending, text, I'm not doing well. I'm having problems. So it took a little Muppet to get
Bring
to
it
that.
out
But
to us.
yeah.
Wow.
And I'm gonna talk about men there for a minute, because I know we're gonna get focused on women a little later. But men are really bad about talking, about looking face to face, expressing their emotions. A lot of times, men, we don't have the words in our vocabulary to express emotion. Someone was telling me their wife asked him, how you feel, and he started talking about what he's thinking and all that, and said, no, those aren't feel words. I want emotion. How you feeling? And so a lot of times we don't. When men get together, when women get together, they often will talk face to face. They'll sit across from each other and look each other eye to eye. Men, when we get together, it's shoulder to shoulder. So we're sitting there, we're watching a game, we're watching a sporting event, we're watching something, we're sitting at a bar or something, but we're shoulder to shoulder. We're not looking at each other eye to eye. And for that reason, I think men are having a harder time with lately with emotional health than women are, because women get together and they cry it out. They get mad, and they can empathize with each other. Men have a hard time expressing that, because they don't want people to think that I ain't like that. I ain't soft.
But I think, think about it. A lot of times we have been raised that way, where we'll tell them, especially the young boys, we'll say, hey, chalk it up and be a man.
Yes.
And so that just causes them to just hold back their emotions. And so we've been trained that way.
We have been. It's very true. And since we're on different groups, I'm really, really concerned. I think a lot of people are concerned about the younger generation. We're talking about communicating. As bad as men were with communicating, it's even worse with young men now. Young people in general, everything is social media. So we'll be at dinner, and I'm not exaggerating. We'll be at dinner somewhere, out at a restaurant. My sons will be sitting next to each other, and they're texting each other, and they're sitting literally right next to each other. Why are you texting him? He's sitting right there. Talk to him. But
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of young people just have a hard time expressing themselves in words because of social media. And then and on top of that, the um, there's a certain amount of um, um, you kind of temper what you say based on on social interaction. So you're not gonna say something mean to someone's face, but if you can text it, you see all kind of mean stuff. So
Yes.
you look at some of these these threads and comment sections and and people's posts, and they say all kinds of evil things because they can do it anonymously a lot of times because your name isn't there or they feel like no one's going to call them on it. And so back when we were kids, if someone said something mean about somebody, well, maybe that was between you and them, maybe your friends, they knew about it. But now someone says something and a text goes out and the whole school sees it.
Yes.
And then and you can't undo it once it's out there.
Mhm.
So so a lot of young people are really suffering from anxiety and depression issues, and they really don't have or feel like they have the means to to deal with it as far as people to talk to about it. And so yeah, it's really concerned about what's happening with with Generation X and and even younger kids.
So, I'm wondering, it looks like we might have a caller on the line this morning. Let's see who's on the line this morning. Let's see if they have something for us. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hello, hello.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Listen, I'm listening to your mental uh, talk on people with mental depression. Now, I have a granddaughter. She's 25, and she has a lot of depression and all that stuff. Now, she's gone to so-called psychiatrists or psychologists, but they're not of our color,
Mhm.
and they tend to give them a lot of medication, and I don't think that they talk to her enough before they diagnose the medication she should have, because she tells me that stuff make me feel bad. That stuff don't do nothing. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering, is there any good black people available for her to talk to?
There are, but you got to be really you got to work hard to find them, and there's a
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah. What you got to do? In fact, there's a big push right now to try to get more Black African Americans into studying psychology, as therapists, because it's yeah, you're right. It's if more even more than than seeing your doctor, seeing a therapist, you really got to be able to connect with that person. And I tell patients, if they see somebody and they don't connect, well, that's okay. People have different personalities, but if that person can't identify with what you're going through, or you can't identify with them, then it really doesn't help.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So now since you say we got to really push, where do I start pushing at?
Oh, there is. I'll start with. I don't know if you how social savvy you are, but if you Google black psychologists or black therapists, there is a website. I can't remember the name offhand right now, but there's a website where you can find black therapists. The other problem we run into is that um, unlike medical care, a lot of times some insurances very either really limit or don't offer um, help for psychiatric health, and so
Yeah,
right, so you might
go
be
ahead.
limited to like 5 visits or something. It was not enough time for a lot of people.
What about
That,
some of the community health centers as well?
Yeah. So you can always
Um,
try. Yeah, you can always try like Isaac Cogs or MLK,
Milwaukee Health
Rocky Health.
Services,
Yeah.
Outreach
but
Community Health Center. See, a lot of those community centers will have some type of people of color to assist you. But there are, as Dr. Izzard mentioned, there are some, but you just have to really dig in and really try to find those. And so he's going to be looking it up, and he'll make sure he mentions that. And if you
uh,
just keep listening, we'll get back to you, okay? Or you can just hear
okay,
it
but
on there.
let me just say this much, and I'm gonna let you go and listen. They,
Okay.
I often hear of mental illness, mental illness. We need to do this, we need to do that. But like the doctor says, as soon as you go and seek the help, the insurance is a problem. And that's the
Mhm.
to me, they don't seem like the government or nobody else is really that triggered on trying to help mental patients. And that's a shame. I mean, it's, of
Yeah.
all the things that we have, they always talk about it all the time, but they have nothing in place to really, really help people. And who got the most mental problems? Poor black folks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
You.
know,
So
the problem too is this: is that um, when you look at like you look at the budget the state spends on Medicaid. You know, so people that badger care, like over 2/3 of the budget is spent on mental health stuff. That's where the money is. I mean, that's where the expenses. You know, if one, a lot of people who are, you know, we're talking like real mental illness, people who are really bad, schizophrenia, bipolar kind of
mm-hmm.
stuff. Those people, if they're hospitalized, that's extremely expensive. And you
Mhm.
look at what happened over with the mental health center, you know, the mental health complex. You know, the county couldn't afford it, you know, so they've closed that. They've tried to find other ways to do it, but mental health can really get expensive. And
Yeah, it
yeah,
can.
So, I would suggest too that, and I really, I guess, I'm a strong believer in some of the community health centers as well for people that are limited with their resources and funds. So, check that out as well. And Dr. Izzard will be looking that up and getting that to you shortly.
yeah.
Okay.
I got one place you can try is better. You probably seen commercials for this. BetterHelp, BetterHelp.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could try BetterHelp, and they will they can tell you you know if you can ask for like a black therapist through
Uh-huh.
them, or um, I know I've seen this before too. Psychology Today, Psychology, Psychology Today, and
Mm-hmm.
that they a lot of black therapists are listed in that way and there too.
Well, all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
But
but good
I just
luck.
thought huh?
Good
Yeah,
luck.
thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Okay,
and
bye-bye.
you said to your granddaughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, be there for her. You know, this a lot of
Oh,
it is just
I am. She
yeah,
lives with me.
Okay. Great.
yeah,
Thank you for calling.
yeah. Thanks for
You
calling.
sure?
We have another
Sure.
caller on the line now. We'll
Bye.
take that call. You're on the air.
Good, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. You know something, like the caller said, this TV case, we're always talking about mental health, and it seems that our black community is fed with mental health, but we shouldn't. We're not the only ones. Every
We're kind
day
of hearing an
we're
echo
under
going
pressure
on right now. So it's something
about
kind of going
something,
on with your phone. I
and
don't know
every
if you
time
could
you
take it
let
off
your
a
guards
speaker.
down and say, "Okay, I'm going to go see someone," then you say, "Well, should I trust them?"
Could you
Look
take
what
your,
they've done
excuse
to
me,
us in the past.
Miss Richardson?
Look what they're doing to us currently,
Obviously,
taking
we'll
things
speak
away
because she's
from us.
not
So when
listening.
you're across the table looking at someone that does not look like you're wondering how much did I trust them. I have friends, and it seems like when our young people get about 24, something happens to them. I don't know what that be. Like all of a sudden they're schizophrenic. They're dealing with something in the past, and I often wonder why did it always go back to your childhood? Because that's where the problem lies. And then they put them on medication that give them a okay. You come in with one problem, now you got two because you have a tick that's going on that you blurt out and you didn't have it before, and it has to do with the medication. So, do you think maybe sometimes it's good to just talk to young people or talk to someone with something that's bothering you and it may not require medication? And then you have a job. It could be that you could be a police officer. It could be you could be an air controller, a pilot. All these things, when you go and start seeking help for uh, mental wellness, it affects your job. So I think it should be honest and let people know it can affect you. Because if they happen to do uh, frequent testing about something, this is going to show up in your blood that you're taking something. Could you address those kind of things when we're dealing with things? And I know we need to go and be a part of study so that when medication is put out there, they have enough of us to take a sample so that we're not being over medicated or is it affecting us in a negative way. Thank you, and I'll hang up and listen to your response.
And you know that last comment is so important. So thank you for calling. Dr.
Yeah,
Izzard, you want to
yeah.
comment
You
on that,
brought up,
please?
you brought up a number of things. About the last one about being careful about about getting into care. The problem is if you truly do have a mental health issue, and you're a person who's a pilot or even who has a commercial driver's license, it's important that that person be stable. You don't want somebody who's suicidal driving a truck because they'll take themselves and everybody around them.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So there's some concern about finding things in their urine, but for the most part, the medications that we're prescribing for mental health issues are not going to be things that are that are going to be in the urine. So in the urine, they're really checking for for recreational drugs. They're looking for cocaine. They're looking for marijuana. They're looking for methamphetamine. They're looking for those kind of things. They're not really looking for these medications. We're talking about someone's on lithium or someone's on um, a medication like we call these SSRIs. Those things are not really screening for in the urine drug screen. So that's not as much an issue. We're more concerned about them getting the right help because again, those people they have not only their life in their hands, but other people's lives in their hands. Um, the other thing you mentioned too about, and that Barry mentioned again, that you do need to have someone who you can identify with or who can give you advice and who can understand where you're coming from. Because a lot of times our responses to things are social, or they're based on how you grew up, and that's why they take it back to childhood. Because a lot of these things they do start out there. There's like some famous experiments, and anyone who's taking psychology knows about this. Where they looked at kids that were in Russia and orphans, and they documented this. These kids that were in the orphanage and kids that came in, pretty well adjusted, small kids. We're talking about like small kids, like infants, um, doing well. They put them in the orphanage. No one touched them, or they only got touched when they got fed, and their behavior changed. And a lot of these behavioral changes never got better. Even as an adult, and you get a lot of kids, who might be either in a foster care system or who've been adopted. A lot of them have problems forming with trusting people, forming relationships because they have that fear that that they're going to be fear of abandonment, that they're going to be abandoned. And sometimes and oftentimes, maybe most times, it's not something that's they're consciously aware of. They just all of a sudden start realizing that they're having chaotic relationships or they can't trust people. And so, a lot of that does go back to to childhood, and so we carry those things with us. Also, this is a good time we talk about like generational trauma. Generational trauma is this idea that things that happened to your parents and their parents and our ancestors before affect us. So I was listening to someone talk recently just about what's going on in Gaza and Israel, and how it seems like the Jewish government is overreacting to this attack that happened on October 10th. Well, they got generational trauma. They are still living out the Holocaust. So we can come back after the break. We can come back and talk a little bit more about that. But these generational things, they affect how people react to things now. And it wouldn't even happen to us, but we inherited this stuff from our parents and from our grandparents.
This is Karen Dodson from the All of Us Research Program. You're at the table. This is WNOV. We'll be back after a break. physician, also the co-investigator for the All of Us research program, including chair of the Cream City Medical Society. Good morning to you, Dr. Izzard.
Good morning. Yeah.
We've been having some serious and some good conversation this morning related to mental health. And, as we talk about it, we had callers that called in. Feel free to call us. You can call in at 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. And as we look at mental health, and we've had some individuals call today talking about some of the challenges that some of their family members are having with mental health. But, I want to step back a little bit. And sometimes we need to look at how do we handle mental health when we first start feeling or seeing the situation unfold. A lot of time we try to just hold back on seeking out some help or assistance in that area or talking it through with someone until it gets to the point where it's just overwhelming for people.
Yeah. In medicine we call it somatizing. So when you have something going on internally in your mind and it starts to have physical manifestations, and then you're somatizing. So oftentimes people will they'll be depressed, and as a result of being depressed, they will start having headaches, or they'll start having chest pain, or they'll have problems with just so they get these physical manifestations, and they go to the doctor and they say something's wrong in my stomach. I'm nauseated all the time, and they do a bunch of tests. They can't find anything wrong. Well, really, what's going wrong may be something that's going on in their brain. So all headaches aren't from a brain tumor. In fact, very few are from a brain tumor. It's usually from stress. And so now, the stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. We talk about stress, and really, stress is good. Stress motivates you to do things. If you have no stress, then you'd be floppy because you wouldn't have anything to tell you to move and change and grow and do those things. So you need stressors in your life to kind of motivate you to grow and change. The problem is your response to the stress. As long as you're stable, able to be motivated by that stress, that's good. But when it gets to the point where it's now disabling you, now it's causing you to feel overwhelmed and have feelings of anxiety, or anxiety may feel like a chest pressure. It may feel like you're trapped. It may feel like you. Then it gets to to extreme where you have panic attacks, where people feel like they're losing their mind or they're going crazy. Those kind of things, that's not normal. Stress will interfere, or really, when I talk about stress, I'm talking about distress. Distress will lead to problems with sleeping. If you can't sleep, then again, when you sleep, that's when your body gets a chance to kind of repair itself. So those things aren't happening. So you're more prone to developing illnesses. You're more you start making these hormones as a response of this distress. And so these other hormones, cortisol and other things, they affect your immune system. You're more likely to get ill with colds and other things. You're more likely to even get cancer. And so part of the research that they're doing when they look at people's response to stress is looking at, are these some of the things that are causing these disparities that we're seeing with African Americans? And maybe, and a lot of people are, think that racism, experiencing racism is one of those stressors, one of those distress responses that is causing problems with Black people. So, you look at, and even if it's not major things, but microaggressions, this feeling like, you're being treated like the other when you're at work or at school, or, people are making comments and you just don't feel like you belong. That eventually that affects you, because again, you're not forming those relationships with people. You don't feel like you can connect to people. You don't feel like you belong. And so, those things, we believe, might be playing a role with some of these things, and not just affecting mental health, but affecting your other health outcomes.
And that's really key. And when I started looking and thinking about what you just mentioned, Dr. Izzard, as far as how some of those challenges that we have gone through. I almost wonder, how did I survive?
Mm.
Because, when you start thinking about it and growing up in Milwaukee and some of the, segregation and isolation that we've had to face as far as being in our communities or trying to get a better education. And then we
Mm-hmm.
might only be the only African American in the classroom, or,
Mm-hmm.
all those things that really keeps us isolated. And to try to overcome those things, it takes years, as you get, for me, it took me
Mm-hmm.
years
Mm-hmm.
as I matured to really start analyzing myself a little bit to help me figure it out. And
Yeah.
so what are your comments on that as far as
Yeah.
how people can look at that a
Yeah.
little bit better sooner?
Yeah. I think a lot of times it happened, for a lot of us, our parents but kind of prepared us for it, saying that, you probably heard this growing up, you need to be, you need to be twice as good to get half as far. You don't be acting up in class because, people are watching you.
Mm-hmm.
And so now in some ways that's good because we learn that, okay, our behaviors not only impact us but impact our race. uh but in some ways it can be disabling in the sense that you feel people always watching you, and you can develop this kind of a paranoia almost. So I think, so culturally, I think, we knew that, people um needed to, to prepare themselves mentally for that. In fact, one of the big things that happened with Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in baseball. He was when they hired him, one of the questions was, can you handle this? Because it wasn't just about him playing baseball, how good he was playing baseball. It was, can he handle the fact that people are going to be, um, you know, spewing racial epithets at him, or that, people are going to be throwing things and spitting at him. Can he handle that? And that's what another thing that made him great wasn't just his baseball player, but the fact that he was a pioneer. He was able to handle these things. You look at people who went through the civil rights movement. A lot of them, they trained these people. They sat at counters and they practiced. What would they do when someone poured milk on their head, or spit in their face, and they had to prepare for that. And I think in some cases people aren't getting that nowadays. We're not being prepared for what's out there. And in fact, not only we're not being prepared for what's out there, a lot of people are of the mind that we shouldn't talk about these things because they make other people feel bad. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
too bad about that. Um,
That's true. That is so
that
true.
history is out there. And it's affecting all of us, not just black people, but white people too.
What do you have to say about people who have experienced multiple traumas throughout their lives are at greater risk of experiencing another trauma?
Hmm.
They also experience more severe symptoms and longer lasting effects.
Yep. And so, we'll talk about PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. We used to think about it, before in terms of soldiers, but people who were in war and experienced trauma that way. But we see a lot of kids, especially nowadays, kids who live in the city. They saw a friend get shot. They saw, they might have even experienced violence in the home. Their father used to beat their mother, or or they've been in foster care system and they've seen these things happening. And so, if no one talks with them and no one counsels them and no one helps them to make sense of the stuff, then it kind of sits in the back of their mind. And again, it starts to having unconscious effects, on their health and on the way they react. And there's that saying, hurt people hurt people. Well, that's how it goes on, because now these people, unaware that they got a problem, are causing problems in their kids or other people.
And when we start looking at mental health and also mental health wellness, mental wellness, when you start looking at it, a lot of times, not only are we looking at it on the, I would say, the medical side, but
Hmm.
also on the spiritual side.
Hmm.
And we're going to talk more about that
Hmm.
with Yvette today too, as some of the challenges that she has gone through. But I wanted you to also comment on that, because I know
Yeah.
you are a
Yeah.
firm believer,
Hmm.
and and that
Yes.
you go and
Hmm.
you take the time to just spend that time
Hmm.
on a spiritual basis.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that,
Yeah.
Doctor?
So, I think a lot of how we react to things deals with is related to our attitude about it. So if you believe that things happen to you at random and you have no control over it, then they call that learned helplessness. So you feel like you have no control of your environment. And there was this terrible experiment I was thinking about now, where they took these rats, and they took some rats that grew up in a laboratory. They put them in water, and they wanted to see how long they would swim until they drowned. So they put these rats in the water, and then some of them drowned within a couple minutes, and then some of them went a little longer. Um, and then they took some what they call wild-born rats, so rats that were not raised in the laboratory. They put them in a bucket of water, and they seemed to swim longer for some reason. So then this experiment, what they did was they took the lab rats again, and they put them in the water. But this time they watched them, and just to the point that they're about to die, they took them out and they rescued them, and they gave them some air and let them recover for a while, and then put them back in the water. And surprisingly, well, I mean surprisingly, but these rats lasted a lot longer once they had been rescued. And the idea, what they think would happen, is that these rats learned that they had hope, so they could swim longer if they felt like they might be rescued. And the wild rats never learned because rats are pretty good swimmers in the wild. So these rats didn't feel as hopeless as the ones that were in the laboratory. Now, how does that apply to us? When we feel like we have control over our environment, when we feel like there's a meaning to things, you can deal with things a lot more than if you feel hopeless. And that's where people's spiritual beliefs come in. This, if you believe that God's doing something in your life, that there's a reason for the things you're going through, and that you're not going to necessarily be you're not going to be overcome by the situation. That God won't give you more than you can handle. That's very powerful. That God's is going through this with you, and that there is a way out of this at some point. You can deal with trial as long as you know there's a trial, but when you feel like this is it, that's when people lose hope. And so mental health is very much affected by your attitude about why you're going through that, and whether there's meaning in it.
I like that, because what you're saying is that either you can be a victim or you can be
Yes.
a conqueror over it, and saying that, I do have control.
Mhm.
And even though in a lot of situations we might have a tendency to say, if I don't have control over it, you do somewhat give up.
Right.
And so, having that psychological mindset
Mhm.
to say that, yes, I can overcome this, and that I'm going to make it through it.
Mhm.
And sometimes we know that, our faith allows for us to do
Yeah.
that.
And even think about, if you don't value, if you don't feel that there's value in your life, if you don't feel like you're loved, you don't feel like, God's there's a purpose for you being in this world, then when you come across other people, why would you expect other people to have purpose, or why would you respect that in somebody else? And so, we look at, kids, we say, how can they have done that? Why are they driving that way? Are they considering other people? Well, they aren't, because they don't consider themselves. And so these are the things. I've been trying to retrain my mind into, people ask, what's wrong with that person? Instead of asking what's wrong with that person, ask yourself, what happened to that person? Because that's, because when we say what's wrong with somebody, we're
It's
kind of making an
already
assumption.
negative,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right. We're assuming that
Yeah.
they're broken, that they can't be fixed, that there's something, inherently broken about that person. We ask what happened to that person, then you realize, there are things that that they experience, that some of it that we can, have responsibility for, that has made them this way, and maybe those things can be fixed or addressed. But instead of asking what's wrong with somebody, ask what happened to them.
I like that, because as I kind of go through life and I start watching people, and in our, because my husband's a pastor as well, and people, when I start talking to them, it makes me start thinking about, let me just go a little bit deeper and to talk with them to see, like, what really happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, then you can understand them better. and then you can also help them
Mm-hmm.
or help them go through that challenge or whatever that's going on in their lives. So
Mm-hmm.
I like what you just said
Yeah.
there instead
Yeah.
of saying that about an individual. It looks like we have a caller on the line.
Yeah.
We're going to break first. Okay, caller. Hello, caller. You on the line? Hello.
Hi,
Hi, this
I
is,
assume I'm on the air.
yes, you are. You're on there.
Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
I as the phone was ringing, I was unable to hear the conversation. But what prompted me to call was the statement that either you're a victim or you're seeking help, and I'm sure that that was intentional. We don't want people to feel, I guess, stigmatized because they're still trying to figure out how they're going to address things.
Hmm.
So to say that, I don't think that's
Okay, I
speech.
appreciate you calling in and explaining that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Because I think
Well,
that's where
ma'am,
we're at the table. And when you're sitting at the
okay,
table with us and we're having discussion and that's what I want. I want people to call in and have some discussion with us. And if it's
yeah,
something that really, kind of
yeah,
makes you say, hey, maybe we need to look at this a little different or say it a little different, that's what it's all
yeah.
about at the table. Thank you.
On that on that discussion, um, I was just wondering. Still, have we done any research with our HBCUs actually leading the research for all of us? Has there been any movement with respect to that?
Actually, there's been a lot of movement in that area with our Black African American colleges, historically Black. Yes, we've been pushing, and they are also in the research workbench. And so, yes, they are part of this program, most definitely. And
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can also go to joinallofus.org. You can see a lot of the different research that's going on. And
Hmm.
also, it shows the connections with all the different entities and organizations that are a part of the program as well.
So, just to be a little technical, I'm just looking to see how many of these HBCUs are being utilized as principal investigators, meaning that they are the ones leading the studies,
Yeah.
not just administering them or participating on a lower level, but actually leading and being the ones to determine what are the criteria, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. Morehouse has really been instrumental. They've been involved at the ground level with a lot of this. So, um, one of the things that the NMA, the National Medical Association, for those who don't know, the back 125 years ago when an NMA got started, Black doctors couldn't join the AMA, so we started our own organization. But anyway, the NMA, that was one of the concerns, was that who's going to be doing this research, and we all of us acknowledge that there aren't enough Black researchers. So the as a response to that, all of us, actually the government has actually funded this program called the Montague Cobb Scholars. I think it's through Morehouse. What they're doing is they're actually paying kids to go to school to become to go into sciences so they can research. So they're looking at medical students. I think medical students and graduate students, and trying to encourage them to do research, because we know we got to build our own if we don't have it.
This is Karen Dodson.
Absolutely.
This
So
is
you said I would be able to actually find this uh, fact that you have the HBCUs involved at the ground level, actually running the studies or developing the studies, rather.
and yeah, they do have access to being a part of the researchers workbench, and they can go in there and pull that data and information and be a part. Yes, most definitely. We're going to have
I
to
think
take
we're
a
talking two different things, but sure, I'll hold.
Okay. We're going to have to take a break right now. And I know Dr. Izzard he's checking that out for you. We have another caller on the line too. This is a hot topic. And so if we can't get back to everybody, we'll try to respond to you in a different capacity. Maybe you can call us at 414-955-2689. That is our number for the All of Us Research Program, and you can ask to speak to me, and we can get back with you on that. On the other side, we'll see you. And this is the All of Us Research Program, and we also have Dr. Kevin Izzard joining us. We'll be back.
Milwaukee.
X 106.5 Milwaukee.
Good morning. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program, and we have Dr. Kevin Izzard with us. We had a caller on the line earlier that had some questions as far as some of the Black historical colleges and some of their involvement. And so I know Dr. Izzard was looking that up, and we'll have to get back with you. I do have a list. I wasn't prepared for that today, but I'll make sure if I don't share it this month, I'll share it next month because we do have quite a few. Historical Black colleges that are involved in this program, and I want to make sure I give you excuse me, fair information on that. But Dr. Izzard, do you have some last words?
I want to, for people like that, I encourage you to ask those questions because that's what we want to know. Because we know that, speaking of trauma, a lot of us have been traumatized by the stuff that's happened in the past with us as being subjects of research. And so, if people have, are uncomfortable with things, we need to, to know about that, because those things need to be addressed. And if people are still uncomfortable with the researchers, finding, are these black researchers, are these white researchers, how are they going to use my information? We definitely want to address that information. And you bring up a legitimate question, because that was one of the first things that the NMA had. One of the first concerns was that, okay, you're doing this research on us, how is it going to benefit us, and who's doing the research, and how we're going to make sure that people aren't going to abuse it like they've done in the past. So that is a legitimate concern. And so, but yeah, for that reason, I know that Morehouse and Howard and some of the other, black, historically black schools have been involved with on the ground level with all of us, and are on the committee that kind of looks at to make sure things are done ethically. And so, and even the NMA, we have members who are on that committee to make sure that, are doing the oversight, the ethical oversight of this. So yeah, thanks for asking those kind of questions. And so, I'm gonna have to go to work and see my patients. So I'm gonna be leaving out, but I want to throw some love at the next person. Come on, Yvette. I don't know if you're on the phone already, Yvette, but
can you bring her on for us? Okay. Good morning, Yvette. How are you
Yvette.
doing?
Morning. I've been enjoying this conversation.
How you doing, sister?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you hear us?
Yes. I said I've been enjoying the conversation. I am retired, but this has been enjoyable.
How you retiring so young?
Yeah, right. I'm legally retired.
Well, I wanted to welcome you this morning, just to introduce you to the community. Yvette is a health conscious marathon runner with medals to prove it. Currently a leader in health ministry at her church. As a public health nurse with over 30 years experience, she has witnessed the damages of ineffective treatments and medications that weren't developed with consideration for African Americans. And I wanted to welcome you today and just say, I just want you to just kind of tell the community a little bit more about you.
Well, I am nurse, BSN nurse, and I had worked at, you guys, from years ago, I worked at Milwaukee County Hospital for 14 years in all the departments, oncology, ortho, emergency trauma. I was the first Black life nurse in Wisconsin, actually. Lost my husband to cancer in '94, and then I transferred into public health public health department, worked there for a bit, received a degree in Masters of Public Health. And then my last stint was working in the public schools, Milwaukee Public Schools, for 20 years as a school nurse. After retiring, I decided to receive my Master's of Divinity degree. And so I started at Morehouse College, and for financial reasons, switched over to the University of Berkeley Theology School. And so that's what I'm doing right now, pursuing a degree in divinity.
And Yvette, I wanted to just mention or just ask you the question as far as the importance of being spiritually fit during a physical health crisis. Can you talk a little bit more about how you've handled that?
Well, first of all, being spiritual fit requires that you have religious coping mechanisms in hand. And some of the things that are required is to have religious belief, religious practices, and have a religious community. The reason why I say that, because as a healthcare worker, I was giving the care, but then when calamity hit me, I had to have a spiritual background. As I had mentioned earlier, that I lost my husband at a very early age. I was not spiritually fit, and I suffered a bout of depression because of it. I was able to get out of that, but I was not spiritually fit for it last a little longer. As time moved forward, and I began to pursue a degree in ministry, I learned that indeed that is very important that you are spiritually fit. In the last 5 months, I lost my mother, I broke my ankle when going on a mission trip in Africa. I broke it in Africa,
Wow.
and I have a diagnosis of glaucoma, and so I've had 7 eye surgeries, and my last eye surgery was April 16th. When I took the eye patch off, the day after the surgery, in my good eye, I couldn't see, and
Wow.
so
Okay.
it required me to be spiritually fit to make it through all of that. And how I had become spiritually fit because of my community relationships with my church, and the fact that also that I am every day pursuing information concerning a closer walk with Christ. So I at this time in my life, I was spiritually fit when these calamities came into my life.
You know, Yvette, I was just looking at the background that you've had because you mentioned as far as the positions that you've held and how you have been a healthcare provider. And because of that, it allowed for you to be able to analyze and look at what's needed in your life. And so when you were talking about, yes, I went to school to be trained to be a nurse. But then also that you looked at that there was another component that was missing that you had to seek more to be able to help you through the challenges. Can you speak more of that?
Yes, that spiritual component. I like you had mentioned when you introduced me. I had done marathons, and I've the full 26.2 marathons. But if you're hit and you lose those abilities, my ankle was broke. I could no longer run. And so what do you need to be able to conquer something like that when your coping mechanism done physically? Well, you have a spiritual. You have to be spiritually fit to get through this disability. And so I was ready. I was ready to deal with these disabilities, not knowing that I was ready. But I had for years been diving into my community, my spiritual community, have a relationship with people that supported me in my community, in my religious community. So when I was down, I had I had spiritual people coming to my home, supporting me, giving me meals, which at one point I had to tell them to stop.
Wow.
But I
That
had
was
the
strong
support.
support. Yes, yes.
I had the support that I needed. I was doing the religious practices as far as prayer, meditation, studying, having a relationship with, not just a shallow relationship with God. You have to be able to talk with Him to say, Lord, what do I do now? I remember when I was told that I was going to have 8 weeks of downtime before I would be able to even start walking again. And I went into a 15-minute depression. 15 minutes, that's it. That's all I was going to allow myself because I remembered how long it was when my husband died. I refused to go there. And I remember, I talked with God and I said, how dare I become depressed when there are so many other people with chronic disabilities? And so I devised a plan to not go into the darkness of depression, but to look at the positive side of my disability.
You know, Yvette, one thing that I'm listening to you and what you're saying to us is that you took control over it. You've been through that challenge before and you knew where you could go. And so you didn't want to go to that place anymore. So it sounds like you were telling yourself, okay, I'm going to allow for myself a little bit of this, but after that, I'm going to have to pull myself out. And that had to be very challenging for you to be able to do something to that capacity.
Yes, it was challenging, but but the challenge was that's greater than not challenging it. And for those who are experiencing depression, you know that it's a place where you're immobile psychologically. You don't see the world as the sky is being blue and the sun as bright. It's being a bright object. So it's not a place that you want to be at, undergoing a time of healing, because that can actually slow down the healing process. I know I wanted to walk again. I know I wanted to run again. And so I said depression would only allow me allow me not to go through my hobbies again of running. And so I refused to go down that road again.
And one thing that when I was reading about your article in Black Women's 50 Plus magazine a couple of years ago, you were talking about research and um, some of the challenges that you feel people of color are going through, and your rationale to why people really should be involved. Can you speak on that?
Sure. My mother at age 37 suffered what we call a TIA, just a mini. And I remember how she made it through. She decreased her salt intake and those types of things. And I had made a vow at age 12 that I would never have high blood pressure. And so that's why I took on the skill of running, and I've been running for 38 years. But also, as we had discussed before, that there are some people of color that are more sensitive to salt and stress and those types of things. And so I realized, when looking at the American Heart Association requirement for sodium intake, I realized that those requirements for people of color with sensitivities to salt were actually higher than what we actually could take in. Some people of color are so sensitive to salt that we cannot even tolerate the minimum level of the sodium. So that's why I was saying that it's very important that people of color participate in all of us, so that we can have more specific requirements for individuals with people of color, with individuals with disorders, disease, so it could adhere specifically to us.
Yeah, bet we have a caller, and then we're gonna bring that caller. They have a question or comment at this time. Caller, you're on the air.
Well, good morning to you and your distinguished guest. My name is Annette, and I have a question. I guess if the doctor had to leave, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I guess, well, the question that I wanted to ask him was about genetics. I have twins, and they're in their 40s now. They are identical twins. And then I have my grandson in his 30s. And through the line, all of them have anger issues, and they are almost identical. Like they go into complete outbursts. In the late 80s, I had to go to my son's school, and he had 8 teachers trying to hold him down, and they had to send him out to see ATC and get him under some kind of control. I don't know. They did put him under some kind of medication, and of course, I followed up with therapy with him. My other son, which they're both 47 now, it's still the same. And now that they are adults, like I told them, you need help. It got to the point where I couldn't control them, so I had to remove them from my residence. And I sought counseling and things like that. I recommended it to them. The court stepped in. I went out and did what I had to do to protect myself. Now there's my grandson. My grandson is showing the same thing between his mother, her ex-boyfriend now, but he literally did some damage to him.
Mm.
over his mom. So what I'm saying is, I told him, you have to get help. I told your father that his father was a significant, your grandfather that, your dad that. Now I'm telling you, oh, grandma. I said, no. So it's like a generational thing of pure D rage. I'm not talking about the regular anger. I'm talking about rage where it goes not from one, it goes from 1 to 100 in a matter of 3 seconds.
Mm. You know,
So that's what I'm hoping for.
yeah, and I know Dr. Zeno Franco, who is a clinical psychologist, will be on around 8:30. So
Okay.
I can make sure that he responds to your question. But
Yes,
Yvette, I
ma'am.
wanted to see if you had something to say as it relates to her concern here.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
that's
shoot.
it's hitting home.
Mhm.
Actually, I had a relative who experienced a psychological crisis at
Mhm.
the age of 20, of age of 19, and normally, as um, research has proven that normally that if you have going to have any psychological issues, it's going to appear around that time, 18, 20, 21, 22. And when you're talking about your grandson as far as having that rage, I believe that I'm not sure if he's hearing voices, what's going on with him, but he actually needs to. Sometimes it's hard for them to talk about it because they don't understand it. What I would recommend that if he or she will allow you to take, or they go to see a psychiatrist, or talk with someone. For my situation, my relative, they were able to help um, them with medication and um, psychotherapy. So, but you don't want it to prolong because it could actually cause them to exhibit things within the community. Some of the things that we see young adults, Black people of color doing in the community is actually signs
Mhm.
of mental health when they're maybe doing violence to people in the community. We don't want that to happen to your grandchild. So, because it did happen to my relative, but we were
Yeah.
able to. He was not killed by the police. They brought him in and took him admit him to the hospital, and now he's doing very well. But so I
Yeah.
suggest if you can get him for treatment or her for treatment as soon as
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
That rage is part of the mental illness.
Yes, ma'am. He doesn't live with me. He lives with right now temporarily with his uncle. And I have suggested that as a matter of fact, right down the street from him is MAH, is the medical health center right there. I said, you just have to walk down the street. This is every day. He's 39. And I said, just walk down the street, go in there and say, hey, my grandmother told me to come in here. Do you have a mental health clinic? Because I have anger issues. And you know what he told me? My medicine is alcohol. My medicine is popping pills and God. And
Self
I told him,
medication. Yeah.
there you go. And I said, you need to stop acting so. And you know what he does? He giggles and laughs. I said, this is serious. And so I put the phone down. I said, when you get serious with me, I'll get serious with you. I said, but you know what? You're going to end up in serious trouble or dead. And he's a fine young man, but that rage. And it's the same rage as why I live in Milwaukee. I left due to the rage of their father. God rest his soul. He's dead now. But I had to survive because I almost died behind that rage. I don't want any young ladies, there's too many young ladies dying. And this is one of the reasons why I want to join and work, or whatever the case may be, at the Sargento Truth House, so they can see the red flags, so they can understand if you see this is there, don't just stay there. If you can move, you can leave, because it's not gonna, you cannot change that man.
Right.
He's not,
Right.
he has to do it.
Exactly.
So
Hmm.
anyway, I didn't mean to hold up the line
No, I
that long.
appreciate the call. And I'm going to also, when Dr. Zeno Franco gets on the
Mhm.
line at 8:30, I'm
Okay.
going to make sure that he also address that question and a concern that you mentioned as well. But thank you for calling.
And thank you. And God bless you and all the things you all are doing. It is a beautiful program and it's well needed. God bless you so much.
Thank you for calling in. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program. I have Yvette Morrow with me. We'll be back in a few minutes. We're going to take a break. And after that, we're going to also be joined by Dr. Zeno Franco.
to just inform the peers that is three things that I want them to do that's important for spiritual fitness. I want them to look at the ways that they're coping, and the three ways that are very important is their religious belief. If they don't have a connection with God, they need to do a reflection and to find out why the orientation to God is not there. They need to go back and find out and reconnect with God. Number two, religious practice. Are they doing any religious practicing, praying, meditation? What are they doing to get closer to God? And that's two things that they should be doing. And number three, are you attached to any religious community for that support prior to the law, to any laws, not just physical laws or laws of a human being, laws of a job or anything? You need to have those things in place. You need to be spiritually fit prior to anything, any calamities or crises coming into your life. And so, hopefully that you hear me. Don't wait for the moment of the crisis to happen. You need to start doing those religious practices, a religious beliefs, and get involved in a religious community.
Well, I thank you, Yvette, for calling in today, talking with us about your experiences and how you were being able to cope, and then also having your medical background. We want to thank Yvette Morrow for joining us, and you have a good rest of the day. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Zeno Franco. Good morning, Dr. Franco. How are you?
Good morning, Karen. It's great to be on WNOV again today with you.
I just wanted to say that we've had some questions that I'm quite sure you're going to be able to assist us with today. Dr. Zeno Franco, he's a clinical psychologist, and also he's a principal investigator for the All of Us research program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And also, you are also at the Veterans Administration as well. So this morning, Dr. Franco, we're looking at mental health, mental health and mental wellness. Let's get it straight, okay? But I wanted to just kind of ask you some of those questions when we're looking at that from your perspective, and how, we had some questions about people were having challenges, and is it hereditary sometimes, and some of the things that people need to do. So I'm just going to ask you to open it up from there.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we've been talking about in some of these discussions on the radio is that there's a lot of mental health stigma. People feel like they can't really talk about it. From our communities of color, there's historical reasons, I think, why people try to kind of maybe hide the fact that they're having issues, or maybe there's a family member that's having some, pretty serious mental health problems, and that's often not discussed. One of the things that we're getting a better handle on through the science is that a lot of the more serious mental health disorders do have a genetic component to them as well. So it's not just what's in your mind, but it's also what's in our body and kind of what we've inherited. And that can, people can say, well, I can't really change what's in my body, what's in my genes. And that may be true right now. But I think it also can help people to understand there's part of it that's just biological, and we can't totally control all of it. And so we have to try to manage through that, whatever kind of cards we've been dealt in life sometimes. And I find for some people that helps with the stigma. It's not just that they're weak or that there's a problem with them mentally, but there is this physical aspect to it as well.
So, and we had a caller that actually talked about her son had some issues, and now the grandson is having some issues, and what can she really do to kind of help her grandson, because he feels like, alcohol and drugs is, he's self-medicating and not taking it serious.
Yeah. So, I think for a lot of the more serious mental health problems here is where some of that, we see it sometimes runs in families, right? So that's one of the ways that there's an indicator that there's genetics involved. Can you still hear me, Karen?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So, I think that things like serious depression, schizophrenia, some types of anxiety, we'll often see there's a grandparent, there's a parent, and then that sometimes transfers to son, daughter, grandkids, and so on. And that has given us a clue that we need to look at it from a genetics perspective. And so we're starting to really do that research. But I think in practical terms, with folks that are struggling in a family with maybe serious depression, anxiety, like you said, maybe some self-medication that can get into drugs, the street drugs, prescription drugs, whatever, really having an open conversation in the family. How has this this disorder, this almost a disability in some senses, impacted multiple generations, and having an open conversation about what those impacts have been, because sometimes the older generation has been through so much, they're trying to protect the younger generation from what they've been through. I mean, that's just a fact. And I think in that, a whole lot of information is lost that the younger generation can start to understand, oh, this is a pattern in the family, and what strategies can I use that are different than maybe what we've done in the past that hasn't really worked.
So for individuals that are facing that, kind of give them like a walkthrough of, like, I know we have the grandmother was talking about her son and then also her grandson. How can they walk through this process? I know you talked about like sitting at the table, talking to people, letting them try to see exactly what's going on. But what else can they do? Where can they go?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things is not to give up hope. I've shared on this program before that my older brother had an addiction history for many years. In the 80s, he was using cocaine, alcohol, and then later got into methamphetamines. And it was a very difficult time for our family. And folks in the family told me to give up on him. My mother was getting older. She really couldn't handle how much chaos he was bringing into the family. And, when he was at his worst, when he was at his lowest moment, people were telling me to turn away. And I actually went and physically picked him up and took him to a halfway house and paid for that halfway house, but didn't give him any cash at all, because I didn't want to be involved with kind of, furthering his own addiction. And he has been sober for 10 years now. He actually moved from the town that he was in, where people knew him. They were trying to push things onto him in terms of drugs and alcohol. And he just left out and moved to a different state and started his own life. And I'm just saying it is possible, and there are resources. So there's halfway houses, there's social workers, there are mental health services throughout Milwaukee that are trying to help.
That's really a good story as far as like not giving up. Because I think that's where sometimes we just say, I'm just tired, I'm giving up. But what you said is that I didn't give up on him, but I also, made a way for him to seek help. But one thing that you mentioned also that I think is really significant is that you said he moved away from that environment. He moved and went somewhere else. Speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody on that's listening now knows exactly what I'm talking about. If folks have gotten into a bad pattern, they may have friends that, are not the best in terms of their influence on that individual. And they're caught in not just the drug addiction or the mental health problem, but a group of people around them that are not really friends, right? They're people that are trying to drag them down. And that's just part of the problem. It's not just a mental health problem. It's not just a physical problem. It's also a social problem. If you're in with the wrong crowd, things are going to go in a bad direction. And I didn't push this on my brother, but I think he realized that nobody in his social circle, no one close to him, was actually trying to take care of him. They were all pushing things on him that were going to bring him to death, ultimately. I mean, he was very close, actually. So he just up and pulled up stakes, and I think it's one of the bravest things that he ever did. He moved 2 states away, and ultimately, I mean, in the last couple of years, he was able to buy a modest house. And I mean, he's in his 60s now, and he has a life.
And that's one thing that I was just thinking also is that how people really react to certain situations. And I mentioned this earlier when we had Dr. Izzard with us, where people who have experienced multiple traumas throughout their lives are at a greater risk of experiencing another trauma. They also experience more severe symptoms and longer lasting effects. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the simplest, things pile up. right? It's not rocket science, but the science is starting to catch up. And I think one of the most powerful things there, Karen, is that we see that, like you said, it's not just that there's a number of things that have happened, it's that the symptoms start to get worse as these things kind of accrue, as they pile up to that individual. And you might get through 10 different events. We all have a breaking point, right? And so that 11th event, whatever it is, can push us past where we're really able to manage it. And I think that that's an important thing for us to remember. And with children too, I think that's one of the things that we have to really think about. Again, in our communities of color, there has been so much trauma, intergenerational trauma, really related back to slavery, to economic marginalization, whatever the root causes have been that has disrupted our families. And kids get that, they get this sort of pile-on effect. And so we really, I think as communities of color, we have to reflect. I'm Hispanic, but we have the same issues. It's different causes maybe, but the same ultimate result. We have to take care that these traumas don't pile up.
Dr. Franco, I'm just wondering, like, when people of color, because you're pretty unique in your profession because there's not so many of you, like it's not so many of us of color, African American. And so that's one of the challenges that someone called in earlier today saying that where can we find people of color? How can we go about doing that? Can you kind of give them some ideas on what they might want to consider in pursuing? I know Dr. Isser gave them some, but I wanted to hear from you as well.
I think we have to start really young, orienting people, orienting families to try to think through how do we push, really genuinely in a good way, push our children to be ready. It starts in junior high school and high school, right? It starts in elementary school, that we have young professionals coming up in the space who are making it through college here in Milwaukee, making it through graduate school, and returning to the community to be a social worker, to be a mental health specialist, to be a peer support specialist, to be a clinical psychologist. And that we know that people of color respond better to a professional who understands something of their background, who looks like them, who has lived in their community. That's a fact. That's something that you can look up in the research literature. But we don't have enough of a pipeline of young professionals coming up into the mental health and helping spaces.
So what do people do because we don't have enough? And so, is there, because I always feel like when I go to a professional or physician, I'm interviewing them as well as they're interviewing me. I'm assessing them. So how can you speak to helping people identify, because we can't always find that African American and that Latino professional, but what can they do?
I think a lot of it is a couple things. Trusting your gut. If you don't have a great feeling about a provider initially, it might not go well, right? And I'm saying give people a chance, but I also work with clients daily who say, I have had a bad experience, and there were some early indicators of that when I first talked to this provider. If you don't feel like you're greeted well, if you're met as a human being, I would be thinking about getting a different provider. And it's tough. There's not enough people out there that are providing these services. We know that. I think the other one is really word of mouth, right? You might not be able to find a provider especially when you get into the specialties, that's from your background. Okay, who has people that you trust worked with? OBGYN, whatever it is, mental health services, some specialty care for cancer. Who do they trust?
And that's key. Who do you trust? Because that's really hard, especially when you're in need. A lot of times we're seeking out, and so how can we, really trust or go about that? And I keep going back to that because it's really hard to find a good provider that really relates to you. And I know people in our community have that challenge all the time.
For sure. And I think part of that, again, comes back to the first question that you asked, Karen, which is really around breaking down stigma, breaking down the sort of, I'm holding this secret. I think oftentimes people don't like to be viewed as being down, that there's something wrong. And it's in those moments when we're needing to seek a specialist, where we also maybe need to be vulnerable with other people and say, I'm having some trouble and I need advice about who to go see. And there are providers of every different color and every different background out there who are trying their best. And so it's really about trying to make sure that we make that connection.
You know, Dr. Whittle, I'm calling you Dr. Whittle because he's our other component. We're a team, Dr.
Yep.
Franco, Dr. Whittle, and
Well,
myself.
and I think to this point, Karen, this is exactly where I'm thinking about Dr. Whittle, right? Dr. Whittle is a senior white
Yes.
provider who is trusted by many, many people of all different backgrounds. It's not that color of skin is the ultimate indicator of a great professional. There are people that I respect, and I wouldn't do this work without Dr. Whittle being involved because I trust him so much.
You know, I do too. And I've seen him and go in all kinds of different communities and, really have a heart for the mission of the program and also the heart for the health of the community. But I wanted to ask you a question like, what are some of the different types of mental health problems that can occur?
I mean, there's all different types of things. I mean, folks are experiencing depression, anxiety. Sometimes it's not a formal mental health diagnosis. The person's just stuck on something. Something happened at work. Something went wrong in a marriage. Maybe there's a trouble with one of the kids. We call that an adjustment disorder. There's kind of a formal name for it in my world, but it's really just a life problem, right? Then there's more serious mental health problems that come up. And there's I think schizophrenia is a little bit more common in communities of color. It's a very serious diagnosis. It can really impact people and families.
Why is it more so in our culture?
That really comes down to genetics, I think, at one level. But we also think there's partially it's exposures to many, many different trauma experiences over time that kind of occur more frequently in our communities. And you have that combination of a genetic vulnerability and maybe some additional traumas, and that can push people to a difficult place in their mind.
Mhm. What are some of the other ones?
I mean, so for me, I work a lot with post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly because I'm at the VA. I work with combat trauma. But the streets in the city that I come from, Los Angeles, I was born in East Los Angeles. There are moments when Los Angeles can be a war zone. And there's moments where in Milwaukee and Chicago are also very difficult environments. And I've had people talk to me about how serious the violence is here. And there's a lot of trauma based on what people see in the street.
And that is so correct as far as looking at some of the trauma and, how do we really digest, that information in our system psychologically. I think that really has a big effect on how we can perceive it and move on. So, especially when you start thinking about some of the younger generations, how can they cope with what's going on right now when you start seeing all the killing and the driving crazy? And, there's a lot going on, and people are almost scared to go outside their homes.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a reality. I think we have to have a really serious conversation with our kids about trying to connect with other people, both at their own age and older, not just online, not just on the phone. And so if I had one piece of advice, I think it's to try to maintain human connections between kids and their peer group and kids and their mentors, whether that's a grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, teacher, that are not just virtual. I think that ability to talk through a problem comes for a kid, especially comes from a foundation of interpersonal connectedness in the real world. I'm not saying that, I finally gave my kids a phone. They need to connect with their friends online. It's part of how things are. But you also need to be able to have a face-to-face conversation. Something's wrong. I need advice.
I think that is so important as far as when we start looking at, okay, we need to have those conversations. And a lot of times, because there's a lot of texting going on, my husband always tells me, why do people always text all the time? Why don't they pick up the phone and call someone and talk to them? And so I think I kind of started getting where just text them, and not having that one-on-one conversation, because then that interaction is so important. And so knowing that, and sometimes we need to put down those phones. I know Dr. Izzard said that his two sons were sitting next to each other at the restaurant, texting each other instead of talking to each other. And so how far do we take it, and when do we realize that there's a component that we're missing out on?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we have to be with the kids where they are. So, like, I do send text to my kids and say, "Hey, what's going on? Can you come down here or whatever?" And I'll send them sometimes something funny, like I was looking at a big truck that I want that I don't think my wife is going to let me buy, and I sent that to my son in a text, like, "Hey, this looks like a nice truck," just to try to be there with them in that space. But at the same time, I've been really trying to practice what I call, for me, mindful fatherhood, but it could be mindful motherhood, mindful parenting, which is, sometimes we might be frustrated. The day's been tough. The kid's trying to say something, and like we're also on the phone, or looking at the computer. And so I'm trying to say, okay, like the work day is done, and I might be trying to take care of a few things, but you have my full attention if you ask for it. And, some little things too, like you're in the car, ask the kids some questions, be present with them, with the moments that you have. And here I'm saying my kids are a little older, and they're teenagers. I'm trying to stay connected with them. And that takes some effort on my part too, because there's so much coming at us as adults. It's easy to just kind of ignore the kids at this stage, right? They got it. They know what they're doing. No, I'm going to try to intrude a little bit so they know I'm there.
Sometimes we got to push through a little bit, even though it's uncomfortable for them. We know that they can recognize that we're there for them. And I do have one question as far as how do we manage mental health over a lifetime?
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating question, Karen. I think I turned 50 a few months ago, and it's different than at 40, and it's different than 30. And I imagine 60 and 70 will be different too. And I've been doing just a lot of personal reflection on kind of the trajectory of my family and, all these different things that have happened. Both of my parents are gone now. And, I think I see in patients sometimes too that they might have felt like they got over something when it happened when 25 or 30, and then at 60, it comes back up, and they're reflecting on it in a different place. And they may be stuck on it because they've interpreted it differently because they're older now. And actually coming in and talking to a therapist can be really helpful, sometimes about the same issue over different phases of life. And I think recognizing that I could use to talk this through, or maybe with a pastor or, a close friend.
So having that communication is key. I know that sometimes even talking to you, I'll say, okay, I need to sit on the couch today. This is what's going on.
Yep.
It's like, okay, I just need somebody to help analyze this for me. Am I looking at this in the eye that I should be looking at it? And so having that communication is so key. And can you speak to that? Because I think that's where a lot of times we hold things in and we don't really open up and let people know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've tried to work on. And, just to say, Karen, in this way, like you and I working through this type of research work in the community over the last several years, we've developed a way to talk through when things get stuck at work, right?
Yes.
And with that has come trust. And I have the same type of what we call consultative relationship with Dr. Jeff Whittle. If I'm worried about something, I'm going to call him. I'm going to text him. I'm going to say, hey, that something's wrong. And I think the deepest part of this is actually recognizing when we need to talk, right? Is I'm ruminating on something. I'm stuck on this. I'm upset, right? I may be irritated with the person. I may be actually feeling resentful. So resentment is an incredibly powerful emotion. And so oftentimes when we feel resentment, we bottle that up and we bottle that up. And eventually it's going to come out in not a good way, whether that's anger or cutting people off, cutting off family members. I can tell you in my family, somebody gets irritated and it's, well, I'm not going to talk to that person for a year. Right. That's not
I know.
the way.
We do have
that's
that
not
happen.
the way, and I think for our family, my family, I would say, was stuck a little bit on drama when I was younger, right? Like that's how that intergenerational trauma was expressed. And so it's taken us decades to say there's an irritation, there's a resentment, let's put it on the table.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll have some closing words with you, Dr. Zeno Frankel from the Medical College of Wisconsin. I'm Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program, and you're joining us with WNOV, and we're at the table.
I'm Vanessa, co-chair of the Juneteenth Vendors.
I am Frank, co-chair of the Juneteenth Volunteers.
Juneteenth is fastly approaching and space is always limited. So if you have an interest in being a vendor, you need to sign up today.
Juneteenth would not be successful unless we have volunteers. We need volunteers for a multitude of different areas. So companies, corporations, organizations, Divine Nine, even families, please sign up to be volunteers today.
So call Northcott Neighborhood House today at 414-372-3770.
Vendors and volunteers call today at 414-372-3770.
Thank you.
Looking to do something special for your mom? With Mother's Day on the horizon? Well, dive into a sea of flavor at Red Crab and enjoy the Mother's Day special. This includes a pound of snow crab legs, a half pound of headless shrimp, and sausage, along with a lobster tail, 2 potatoes, and 2 corn on the cob for just $58. That's right, $58. Now until Mother's Day. Red Crab is located at 5547 North Mothers Lane Road. For more information, please call 414-429-9574.
Dr. Frankel, closing remarks.
Just have hope, Karen. I think there's so many difficult days for folks, and there's so many beautiful days, and we're just trying to get a few more beautiful days in than we've had maybe, and that does take hope. I think the other thing is just share something, even if it feels a little scary, be a little vulnerable, even if it's not for yourself. It helps other people to see that it's possible to talk about things that are maybe not the most pleasant, and it gives them a way to really engage in the future.
I want to thank you for joining us. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. That was Dr. Zeno Frankel joining us. I'm going to ask that you join us next month, the first Monday of the month from 7 to 9. And we're at the table. I thank you for joining us. Everybody have a wonderful, blessed week. And I just wanted to add, I said first Monday, I meant first Friday. All right, I had to get corrected in the studio here. So I'll see everybody the first Friday of the month from 7 to 9. Everybody take care.